is a D6 generation pip. Yeah, one of those dots on the side of a six-sided die. Yeah, a pip. A short pip. Little something. About anything gaming related. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ. We'll see what's coming up today.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's another Pip, and we wanted to give sort of a post-mortem of what happened at Captain Con, our local convention here in February, and sort of kind of wrap up our coverage of Adeptus Titanicus, right, Russ?
Exactly.
So Russ and I showed up bright and early.
Reasonably so, yeah.
Because we couldn't remember when our event was.
No, we couldn't.
Nope. So we decided, as any responsible media personality would, to get breakfast first.
Indeed. Well, you want to make sure going to these things you are well fed.
That's right.
Reasonably well rested and full of energy. Because, when Craig and I do these things, we want to bring a lot of energy to the party. Right, Craig?
That's right. We're actually doing this for basically making that whole row of tables not be able to concentrate on anything but what we're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
And you don't do that on an empty stomach.
No.
So we had a very nice diner breakfast. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
Russ introduced me to a new spot.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd been there ages ago, but
right.
And then we showed up, and it was interesting because we had sort of signed on for 1 2-hour session.
Yes.
And the entire debate between Russ and I was it 10 to noon? Was it 11 to 1? And
right.
both of us were sort of leaning towards 11 to 1, we thought is where things are going to lean out or head out. And we got there, and we had the table from 10 to 6.
We did. So and I think that's because the organizers were like, you know what, we'll just give you as much time as you need. Yep. And so we had a lot of flexibility. So it was actually pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're super, super nice and extremely supportive of us.
Yeah.
And I think they really appreciate the events that we do every year and the energy that we bring to that. This year they put us right next to Seppi, which was awesome.
Which I think we're the only people, Craig, at any convention who can be louder than Seppi.
Right. And the funny thing is, not only that, but we're kind of insurgent.
Yes.
And so rather than compete with Seppi, we actually incorporated him into our event.
We did. So I like to have this mechanic in any of the games we do. I like to get, team participation, get lots of yelling going. And this comes back from, I have to blame this originally on Games Workshop. So when I used to go to Games Workshop events, they'd always have everyone yell WOG and battle cries. And so I really like that aspect of it. So I've always incorporated it into all of our crazy events. So this time around, I asked both sides, come up with a battle cry. And whichever side gave a louder and more energetic battle cry would get a +1 to their die roll. But this time with a twist, because Seppi also got to yell a battle cry. And if he was louder than both teams, no one got the bonus points.
That's right. So what you did was you recruited him into the process, thereby bringing him onto our side. And thus, no longer was it a competition, but he was a feature rather than a bug.
We were, instead of being that annoying loud table next to his table trying to do demos, we were the participant in his game and he in ours to attract more folks to both events.
Indeed. And it worked well. Except for the point where eventually that one side just completely gave up even trying because he is so ridiculously loud. They were like, oh, just whatever.
We can't beat that guy. He's crazy.
We're not even going to try.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what did you think about the numbers for our event, Russ? We went down with wildly varying expectations. We thought if we have X number, we'll be good. If we have Y number, we'll be good. Anywhere in that range, but Z would be perfect.
Yeah, we were kind of feeling like, obviously 1 or 2 per side would feel a little light. Yeah. And we could handle like 5 or 6 per side, but we thought that would be a little crowded, a little heavy. And you might not be, you might have such few units per person. It might get boring waiting for your turn. And so we felt like 3 to 4 people per side would be ideal. And we actually landed right in that sweet spot, right, Craig?
Yeah. Oh, it was awesome. We had, and it was, I don't know if it's Russ's presence or what, but it always seems to work out this way. We had like 2 or 3 people hanging out, getting ready for the event, and then this big group of friends all came and like, we're all gonna do it. We were like, oh, that's gonna be a big crowd. That'll be cool. That'll be okay. And then exactly the right amount of them returned, and the other guys were like, we have an event we forgot about. So it was like this perfect synergy where everybody got a couple of units. So no one was there with only one thing, and if it died, they had nothing to do. You had to lose both of your things, and then you would have nothing to do. Which did eventually happen for somebody.
Yeah.
But the key was that we had enough people on both sides that there was a good presence around the table. And the thing that I thought was interesting was we had already done this mission like 3 or 4 times, fine tune it, and from Russ's initial concept, which we came up with in December actually, and then we kept playing it, but we kept playing it locally, right? So it was always like one of us was always involved as a player on one side or the other, and then there would be people that we wanted to bring in to see if we could teach them the game on the fly, so to speak, which is what these events are all about to us. And the strategies always seemed to sort of come down in one general kind of sort of thrust, I guess, like a philosophy. And so the games always came down to almost exactly the same thing, even when it was like Russ played one side and then our friend Chuck played the other, or Dave played one side and I played the side that Russ didn't play. And it always came down to almost exactly the same thing, because the one thing we kept consistent was when Russ and I first did it together, we did our deployment normal, like you would for a regular Adeptus Titanicus game. And we kept the deployment, other than a little tweaks to make it a little more fair. We kept the deployment the same for all of the games that followed, which was interesting because when I deployed my Warhounds, I deployed them side by side, all squadroned up, and Russ deployed his on either flank so that they would be more versatile. And that sort of throughout the entire run of games that we played. And we kind of, I went in thinking, okay, so these guys go here and these guys go there, and it'll be fun, it'll be on the rails, everything will be fine. And these guys were like, okay, I'm taking this guy all the way around to the backfield. Oh, these guys are gonna, and it was completely a different game.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see how they calculated their plans. So as you may remember, for this mission, we had 5 different objectives on the table, 2 on your side of the battlefield, 2 on the opposite side of the battlefield, and 1 in the middle. And the twist was that the one in the middle is worth 3. Each of the ones on your side is worth 1, but the ones on your opponent's side of the table are worth 2 each. And these victory points are scored at the end of each round. So every round you want to maximize it, but the way the size of the battlefield and the speed of the units was such that you could easily you clearly pretty much start on the 2 on your side, and you could easily reach the middle one in turn 1. And if you really wanted to go crazy, you could even be threatening the ones in your opponent's backfield, at least in turn 1, and clearly have them by turn 2. And the tactics that one side decided to opt for, which really surprised us, was both sides did aggressively go for the center, but one side elected to forego defending one of their objectives and went to really put a lot of extra pressure on the objective on the other side, which was a surprise move, I think, for both sides, as well as for Craig and I. And to watch that happen was really very interesting.
It was fun because it was like right out of left field. We hadn't even thought about that, and no one had thought about that in any of the games that we were playing. And then the another thing that was different was one side really they didn't castle up, which was the impression I think we gave on Twitter. And if you want to see some pictures, there are a lot of really great pictures on Twitter that both Russ and I put out there. And then actually there are a couple listeners that put out some really cool pictures also. The Mortis, the heretics, the Horus's boys, they kind of didn't really cohere into a plan. Actually, I shouldn't say that. The Knights totally did and completely committed and charged down the flank. But the Titans sort of milled about in the backfield. They went one direction and then they went back in the other direction. Whereas the Legio Griffonicus, the loyalists, just kind of charged everything forward. And so they had a lot more in play. But what that actually ended up meaning was that the middle was just like a decimated wreckage nightmare graveyard of dead titans and dead knights, and because the Death's Head, the Horus Heresy guys, the heretics, were just kind of like in a position to shoot a lot, but they weren't in a position to really make a run for the center until the end. So the Gryphonicus guys lost a lot. If you look, a lot of the pictures that I took, I kind of kept. We used to call it, when I started playing Warhammer 40,000, we called it the Wailing Wall, which is not really, it's kind of sacrilegious. Or at least, not
more than a little, honestly.
Yeah. But we would also call it the wall of honor. That's where we put all of the dead models. And I think at the end of the game, the bad guys had lost maybe like 2 or 3 knights, and the good guys lost like I think all their lancers, and they lost a bunch of their knights. They lost 2 warhound titans. And so the discrepancy in the losses was crazy, but the entire time the Griffins were ahead because they were losing their models because they were being so aggressive and pushing on all the fronts. So that eventually it literally came down to the last possession, the last shots. If they could have taken out the Legio Mortis Warhound that was contesting the center objective, it would have been over. They would have won by 3, and instead, like, everything was bouncing. The Warhounds were using their rule where they can combine their void shields perfectly, so that the hits were just shedding off onto both Warhounds. Like each one of them was taking a couple hits each turn, and then the last barrage could have done it and then missed.
Yeah, I think that was really amazing about this. I think couple things that happened that were awesome, as Craig described it. One of the things that happened was really fun to see was that because both sides, or one side was particularly overly aggressive, they got their stuff right in the enemy's grill, and we saw a lot of hand-to-hand combat, more so than normal, and a lot of combat inside the void shields, which caused for a lot of damage, and it was really, really fun to see that. And also because all the weapons were brought to bear and a lot of enemies move around, we saw a lot of void shields break through, we saw a lot of damage. And I think the most impressive thing about this, and I know, Craig, when you and I first talked about Adeptus Titanicus, we talked about, it is kind of a high price tag. The models are fantastic, but it's not a cheap game. No. But I will say this, I think I was really impressed. We kept to the hard time limit. So we timed the game to exactly 2 hours. Yep. And we had, as Craig mentioned, 3 per side of players who had never seen the game, much less knew the rules about it. I mean, some of them were 40K players and they appreciated the universe, but they never played this version of Adeptus Titanicus before. So they're learning from scratch. We took out of that 2 hours, we explained the rules. Craig had a nice 10-minute overview of the fluff. We talked about the sheets and all the mechanics of the game and how it all worked. And we just started playing. And these guys were doing some next level tactics, as Craig pointed out, that we haven't seen within 5 minutes of playing. So the rules are super easy to absorb and understand. And people weren't really asking how rules worked very much right after the game started. They were really thinking through their options. And in that tight 2 hour time period with 3 people aside, which could have resulted in a lot of, huddled up thinking and analysis paralysis. Instead, they played fast, they played excitedly, but they were planning for some really interesting game. But in 2 hours, we got a lot of game in. It felt like a full game. A lot of action happened, high scoring. It was a blast to watch. And my takeaway, Craig, is you take a mission like this, and by the way, we posted the mission on Twitter as well. You take a mission like this and you try it. This game, while a little bit expensive, it is a fine multiplayer game in this capacity. It's a lot of fun to play, and I think you'll have a lot of fun in your gaming group. And when you think about the fact that 3 to 6 people could play this thing, collaboratively, team versus team, that's a lot of gaming value when you think of it that way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, I mean, you can get short, not the knights, and the knights, the knights take them or leave them. The knights kind of add a really cool element in our mission, but I still haven't seen them used a lot to good effect in the standard missions where they can't take objectives and things like that. The forces that we took, I think it's like $140 to get all of those models in one box retail. So it's not that expensive. I mean, then you're going to want more stuff and you're going to want more options and you're going to magnetize and everything. But to get into it, Well, yeah, I mean, no. You know what? I'm not going to soft pedal it. It's expensive because you've got the models, then you need the cards, and you need the dice. So yeah, so you're yeah. And you know what? And I don't want to I don't want to take away from Adeptus Titanicus because I love it and I'm super happy I have it and I'm hoping that we play more. But the fact that last night, Russ, you spent $115 on a Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game. And out of the box, in less than 10 minutes, we were playing a game where you had a fully functioning, medium-sized, not a small, but a medium-sized army in that game. Just with the starter box for the free folk and the one unit box that you had access to. I think that kind of is like a whole new level of cost of entry to me. So I'm in a bit of a strange place mentally right now as far as that's concerned. But I think it's worth it. I think Adeptus Titanicus is worth the money. I definitely think it's worth it if you love the 40K universe, especially if you love the Horus Heresy. If you have nostalgic recollections of Adeptus Titanicus in its original form, I think this game is far superior to that. And I love it. I think it's exactly the right combination of granular and abstract. That's
yeah. I think you're right, Craig. I don't think it's definitely not an exceptional value, and it really, I think GW is unabashedly playing to nostalgia with this, but it is a really good giant robot game, and several of the players there, like myself, have a lot of great feelings for BattleTech, and we were talking about the new BattleTech sets, and we were talking about how excited we are about the new BattleTech stuff. But to the point where several of them, including myself, kept saying heat because Adeptus Titanicus does a nice job with the generator overloading and those kind of thing, which basically emulates the mechanic of heat and BattleTech, where you can push your speed, you can push your weapons, but when you do, there's that chance that things will go awry. And it does have all those great elements to it. But I do think, there are other games that are, if you're not passionate about the 40K universe, there are other games that are much more affordable that do giant things in cities better, a la Monster Apocalypse, a la BattleTech. And of course, there are now large miniature scale games that are way more affordable, as you mentioned, Song of Ice and Fire. So you're not going to buy this game for its unique value or even its super unique rules. You're going to buy this game because it's got nice, modern, clean rules that really make you feel like you're driving Titans. So if you're a GW fan and you love the 40K universe and you love Titans, there is no better game. And the terrain looks great. And, if you've got the terrain collection, you've got some of the right size buildings and you can make a great looking table, these models are fantastic. So it's definitely a hobbyist game. It's definitely a Games Workshop game, but it's a lot of fun. And what I was pleased with was it felt very tactical. It felt very strategic. And the players picked it up quickly, which is not always the case with the GW game. So I really did like that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and I think we followed in our own footsteps. Whereas several people walked away from that table having gone on their phones and made
and ordered them, yes,
or orders from their local game store.
Yeah, we sold some copies today with that, which is great. Now, one thing also we should say is that we did tweak the rules. So, and I do think your mileage will vary on the core rules of the game. I mean, the core rules are fine, but a couple of the rules that we tweaked that you might want to look at was one, we did design a brand new mission specifically for this high of a player count. And that's again published on Patreon as well as our Twitter feed. But secondly, we also made a couple of rules tweaks. One, we armed all the little guys, Craig, the little guys, I forget their name again.
Knights.
The little knights. They were all armed with battle cannons. And you can choose how to arm those guys, but you might as well give them all battle cannons because it's the only weapon that makes any sense at all in the game. And I'm not being facetious. That's literally the case. As far as I can tell, unless we are missing something really kind of subtle.
The melta guns are awesome, but they're super short range.
Yes. Well, yeah, I guess you could do melta guns. The second part about them, though, is that we did alter the rules in our mission to allow them to capture the objectives. So that at least, now to be fair, with all battle cannons, we did have a unit of them run up under a warhound and shoot him in the chin and kill him. So they are possible to do some damage like that with, again, if they're all armed with great weapons. And I say great, I mean great for them. They're still the worst weapon in the game. But they can at least be mildly effective there. But I still think they don't you'll just never take them unless you let them hold objectives. And then as soon as you do that, one other thing we did was we designed several of the objectives on the table in very small alleyways so that only the small guys could get there, right? So it made those units meaningful. So we did adjust the game to really make those units beneficial. And the reason we did that was we knew in a higher player count game, you might be stuck only running one of those little units. And we didn't want one of those little units to feel kind of like useless. So by making their specific tactical options that only they could really take advantage of, and by giving them, consistent weapons, you have to memorize which models got what, and it would keep the game going fast, and also giving the weapons that were reasonably good with decent range, it could also do something at least. We were hoping that those units would prove useful, and I think they actually did do a very good job in the game.
Well, first of all, they're taking objectives, right? Secondly, those it was the Questoris Knights, which are definitely the weakest, that took down that Warhound. And it was interesting because those guys are sort of jack of all trades, master of none, especially if you give them all the weapons that they come with on the frame. I mean, you have to give them one of each type of weapon. And as Russ said, one of them is only situational at best. One of them is useless for anything. You're going to roll a bucket of dice and find out that it can't hurt anything. And then the other weapon is the rapid fire battle cannon is moderately useful. And then their hand-to-hand weapon is it's okay compared to them. You have the Cerastus Knights, the Lancers, who are ridiculously good at taking out anything in hand-to-hand. And the Legio Mortis guys had those guys hold back in their own deployment zone. Although maybe they were anticipating a counterattack. I guess that would make sense because they held them back the whole game. But their knights, their Questoris Knights charged forward and were crazy.
Yeah, it was a fun time to watch, and I think it was really neat to see the players do their thing, and everybody was fully engaged and making plans. So, as a convention, sort of, to show up and play game, it went really, really well. And Craig's too modest to say anything, but kudos to Craig for amazing paint jobs and amazing terrain as always. That's definitely a big part, I think, of what attracts people to the game, and it also, the Games Workshop game, that's what it's really all about, right? It's hard. Every Games Workshop game is a hobby game, and so to really show them at their best, you have to take that time and invest in it. And as Craig always does, it was amazing there. And again, big thanks to everyone who played with us at Captain Con. I have to say that everyone who joined us at the table were perfect gentlemen, really just a fun bunch of people to play a game with. And really one of the highlights of why I love going to cons is just meeting new people and playing games with them and just having a great time. And these were all folks that I would be happy to play at a game table again with. They were just really a nice bunch of folks. So a big thanks to Seppi also for putting up with our yelling and screaming right next door to him.
It was awesome. I had a blast. I'm really, really happy with the way it all turned out. But I think I need to address the elephant in the room, Russ.
What's that?
I don't believe we've ever done an event at Captain Con and played that game again.
Oh, is that true?
I'm thinking back. You know what? No. Our first game ever, back when it was TempleCon, and I think now with the sad and unfortunate demise of TempleCon, we can say Captain Con took his place. Anyway, we did play Uncharted Seas, and we kept playing Uncharted Seas for years after that. So that's yes. But lately, I feel like we did Rune Wars. It was the last Rune Wars game we played.
That might be true.
We did Gates of Antares. Pretty sure it was the last Gates of Antares game we played.
Oh yeah, that might be true.
And we did what else? There was one other one in the modern era. What was before that?
Not Conflict 47, was it? No.
Yes.
Was it? Oh,
like 47.
Darn. Was it really?
Yeah,
okay.
I did that big crashing airplane.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Boy, that's terrible. Yeah. Do we just burn out on them, or do we move to the next thing? You know what it is? We move to the next thing because what's going to happen next, Craig, is we're going to go to Adepticon and we're going to run a charity event there, and it's going to be Song of Ice and Fire, and we're going to completely forget about Adeptus Titanicus. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think it's two things. One, we are charging headlong into the next cool thing all the time. But two, I'm always the one who's like, Russ, let's do this. I've got all these cool models. I'll paint them up. Right. And then I burn out, painting, get like churning through all these models in the train and everything to get them ready. And then I'm like, I need to do something else. And so I think next year I'm going to let you dictate what we do.
All right. We'll do. We'll try that out. Well, all right. Well, thanks for listening. We really appreciate everybody tuning in again to this PIP. And also, we want to make sure we thank our friends at Captain Con for inviting us down, as always, and giving us a great place to play. Such gentlemen, such a great event. Awesome. And again, it is the show, that venue, that time of year. That's where the D6 generation started, and we're always happy to go back. It's like a little bit of nostalgia.
It is a lot of nostalgia.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@thed6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.